Good afternoon, everyone. So today I'm just going to do a short video on draft number 5, which is due on the 3rd of July. Okay. So draft number 5 asks you to make clear links to Leiper's 1995 whole tourist system model by identifying which transit routes tourists arrive at to your destination. Okay. So what I'm going to introduce you to today is actually Neil Leiper's model. So what Neil Leiper came up with in 1995 is an identification of how to see where the tourist has come from, see where they've travelled through, and to see where they've arrived at. And he came up with this model that you can see here on the screen. Now, this model essentially has 5 different stages to it, and you can see here on the left-hand side, there's a tourism generating region, also known as the origin. Place of origin is where the tourist lives, normally resides at, etc. Okay. And then you'll see in the shaded box, there's a transit route region, or TRR, it's also known as. And people also call it the transit region. And you can see an arrow going one way, saying the departing tourist, and an arrow going back the other way, saying the returning tourist. And then on the right-hand side of this model, there is another circle that says the tourist destination region. Sometimes it's referred to as a TDR, but it's actually probably just as easier to call it the destination. So one of the reasons why Leiper developed this model is that the academic awareness of tourism before 1995, before Leiper came up with this model, had actually started becoming quite a complicated process of who was a tourist, where were they going, where did they come from, and how did they get to that place. So essentially, Leiper just developed this very simple system, this whole tourism system model that you can see this illustrated. Now, this is also referred to, the model is also referred to as the basic whole tourism system model. It's called that for a couple of reasons. Number one, it is actually very basic. It shows someone leaving a place, going by a certain route, and arriving at a place, and then finish their holiday or their vacation, and returning via the same route and returning back to their place of origin. It's also basic in the fact that you can add lots of layers to this model, and you can start adding different complexities to this model. We're not going to do that at this stage. We'll look a little bit at that in the 3rd year of study, but we're not actually looking at that for this first year in comparison to this first year. This is a little bit like a conveyor belt as well. And you can see where the departing and the returning tourists, transit route, etc. It's this ever-moving conveyor belt, or it had been ever moving up until the COVID-19 pandemic, which struck 2020. And it's almost that you've got the effects of that conveyor belt stopping at the moment. We're seeing that the conveyor belt stopping is a stopping of the tourist movement. And that stopping of the tourist movement has impacted negatively on transit routes, hotels. It's impacted on bus companies, even within a New Zealand perspective, from when we had the level 4 lockdown and a bit of level 3 lockdown as well. It's impacted on airlines, international airlines, domestic airlines. It's impacted on cruise liners. It's impacted on all these different aspects. Now, there are some complexities, like I said, to this model. One of the complexities is that when you look at this model that's in front of us here, we can see that you're almost identifying 3 different places: the origin, transit route, and destination. However, every place can technically be every part of this this model. So I'll give an example of Auckland. Okay, Auckland, biggest city in New Zealand by far. Auckland is a place of origin. It's where a million and a half people live, and it's a place where also lots of people transit through Auckland. The majority of international arrivals to New Zealand arrive in Auckland, but that doesn't mean they stay in Auckland. Prime example is my family come over from the UK. They came over from the UK at the beginning of 2020, but they didn't stay in Auckland. They arrived in Auckland. That was one of their transit routes, arriving from the United Kingdom, but their destination was actually New Plymouth. Okay, for part of that trip, their destination was also actually New Zealand, looking at it from where they left from and where they came to. So again, we take Auckland into account. Auckland is a place of origin, like I said. It's where a million and a half people live. It's a transit route. It's where people arrive into New Zealand and then they go on to different places. It's also a transit route for people who are living in New Zealand. They might come from go from the south of New Zealand, New Plymouth, say, Hamilton, Wellington, South Island, etc. And they might be driving up to Northland. They might be driving up to Cape Yanga, for instance. They will travel through Auckland. Auckland will be a transit route destination. You can see that with all the road structure going through Auckland. You see that through all the rail lines going through Auckland. You can see that through a multitude of different examples. Auckland as well is also a destination in itself. Okay, so people go to Auckland to have a vacation. People go to Auckland to have a holiday. It might be a weekend break. It might be a short break over from Australia. It might be people coming who live in a more rural setting in New Zealand, and they go to Auckland for a week to have an experience where lots of people are compared to where they normally live, maybe on a farm example, or somewhere rurally within New Zealand. and that can be anywhere in the world. So any place could be all 3 of these. There are some places that are known to be destinations more than origins or more than transit routes. You could, in many ways, say that New Zealand, on a global movement of tourists, is perhaps not a transit route region. Somewhere like Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Singapore, Hong Kong, they're all known as transit route destinations. Okay, they're all known as places where you will have a stopover, a layover, if you like, on a long international flight, the Northern Hemisphere to the Southern Hemisphere, for instance. That's where these aspects kind of come into play. Destinations like Hong Kong. Hong Kong's a really good example, where they've developed a lot of attractions, a lot of facilities that are developed for the people who are there for a short period of time. Okay, the shopping centres, the tax-free shopping centres, even places like Disneyland, etc., amusement parks. When we went to the UK about 4 years ago, we had a couple of days going out in Hong Kong, and we stayed in one of the hotel accommodations in Hong Kong. We just stayed there for a couple of days just to break up the journey a little bit, And then when we came back from the UK, we stayed in Hong Kong for a little bit longer, probably about 4 days, I think it was. And we went to Disneyland Hong Kong. We went shopping for new clothes and stuff, um, and we really had a different experience than we did when we went out there. And that was only for 24 hours when we went out there. But some of that Hong Kong, Singapore, like I said, is really popular as a transit destination, particularly in northern hemisphere to southern hemisphere, or southern hemisphere to the northern hemisphere. Um, and they are those places have really geared themselves up to be a transit route destination in itself. Okay, there'll be examples of this, and there are examples, really good examples within. So say at Auckland, even with the Novotel Airport near Auckland Airport or next to Auckland Airport, there's a couple of other airports there, airport hotels there. So those airport hotels will operate very differently in that they will have 24-hour check-in, 24-hour check-out, because they know that people will be arriving from a long-haul flight. They'll be tired. They'll want to go to the room. They'll want to check in. The room will be available. They'll check out maybe when they're getting another flight out. So some people, so they'll really have a 24-hour a day check-in check-out system. Whereas normal hotels, you can only check in after 2 p.m. in the afternoon, and you can check out before 10 a.m. in the morning. that gives the housekeeping team about 4 hours to turn around those rooms. There's a lot of places in New Zealand, say the Bay of Islands, that are known to be predominantly destinations more than anything. You do have people living there, so it is someone's place of origin, but the majority of activity there is centered around tourism and tourist activity. There are people sometimes that transit through a place like Bay of Islands going on somewhere else. There might be backpackers around New Zealand. There might be people who have hired camper vans to travel around New Zealand. So there's lots of different examples about how this kind of works. Lots of positive and negative examples of all this as well. I want to give you an example. If you look at a travel from New Plymouth to Auckland. Now, it's generally considered that if someone is driving and they're driving quite a distance, it's good to have a break from driving after about 2 hours, 2.5 hours. Okay, particularly if you're in a 4-hour journey. So if you consider you leave New Plymouth and you're heading towards Auckland, you go over Mount Messenger, you go through the gorge, and you start coming out the other side. Now there's a place called Pew Pew, Pio, and it's just a town, very rural town. There's a lot of farming communities around there. There's parts of the where they filmed some of Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit, and there's big signs when you go through there. You drive through Pew Pew, the township, and it's a very quiet town. Not much really happening there. And then you drive out the other side. You're driving towards Auckland, and there's a real cool cafe on the right hand side called the Fat Pigeon, and this cafe has a real cool children playground nearby as well. There's some public toilets there as well, and that is a really good example of a private business person who owns the Fat Pigeon Cafe, realizing the geographical potential of where Pew Pew is. 2 hours or so from Auckland, about 2 hours or so from New Plymouth, just centered in the middle. So people who are driving from Auckland to New Plymouth, they might have a rest, something to eat, a coffee, for instance, before they head over the gorge of Mount Messenger and into Taranaki. And likewise, people who have travelled from Taranaki go to Auckland, they've come over Mount Messenger, they've come through the gorge, and they're going to have a little break, a little coffee, little toilet break perhaps, stretching of the legs, kids can go on the playground, etc. And the people who have developed the Fat Pigeon Cafe have actually done very well, recognising it as a transit route destination. Now, it's not a destination where you will stay for more than 24 hours, or less than 365 days, but it's a place where people will stop, people will have a lunch break, etc. You also see this on main highways where there's things like McDonald's drive-throughs, etc., where there's Subway restaurants, etc. I'm thinking of that drive a little bit further, Udrahonga, there's McDonald's on your right-hand side, as you're driving from New Plymouth region, etc., petrol stations, etc., etc. So these are the things that I want you to think about when we look at the assignment. We're clearly linked to Leiper's whole tourism system model, by which transit routes to the tourist arrive at your destination. Now, what I want you to think about there is what you've already talked about in line with your domestic tourists and your international tourists, okay? And you're relating it to Leiper's model. You're saying these are international tourists. You're almost relating back to what you talked about, but you're saying how these people arrive there. So in your example where you talked about tourism statistics and where these people come from, etc., this is where you're saying about how they actually arrive, which routes do they travel. This is also called tourism flow, which we look on as well, which is also on on Canvas. Now, for all this to work, Neil Leiper came up with these following examples. What he said is that for the tourism system to work, and that tourism system, like you've just seen, that conveyor belt, you need, actually he said you only need one tourist for that to happen. And that could be someone driving somewhere to pick something up and then driving back home. You need one tourist, you need that movement. You need a geographical element, so they go from one place to another place. Now, if you remember right back in week 1, we looked at definitions. There's no definition that says a tourist has to go a certain amount from his or her known place of residence. And this is supported by Leiper. So what Leiper said, you need one tourist generating region, one place of origin. You need one transit route, at least one transit route, so they go by a route. And you need one tourist destination, or at least one tourist destination. If you've got all them, if you've got one person who's leaving one place, going via a place, and arriving at another place, and you have to go via a place, okay? Even if it's one long straight road, that's the transit route. What he says then is essentially you have the travel industry, okay? You have the tourism industry, but you certainly have the travel industry, because someone is traveling from one place to another place. Now, like I said earlier, someone might travel from one place to another place. They might fill up their car with petrol or diesel before they leave. They might drive somewhere, pick up a parcel, turn around and drive back. There might be no economic leverage, no economic spending in what happens. Many times, though, there is. Even if that is someone driving from, say, New Plymouth to Auckland and then back in the same day, they will probably stop and get a coffee or a bite to eat along the way. Okay, it might be when they get to Auckland and then turn around and drive back. It might be somewhere en route, the Fat Pigeon Cafe, for instance. Now, more often than not, there is more than one tourist that makes up the tourism system, as you know. There's normally millions and millions and millions of tourists every year that are traveling, people that are traveling. On many occasions, people travel more than once in a year. Everyone leaves from somewhere. Everyone leaves from their usual or their normal place of residence. Even if that's not your official residence. Okay, so say if you're studying at PIMS, that's your temporary residence for 6 months. In normal cases, or maybe 12 months if you're in the final year of the degree, but you will leave your normal place of residence, okay, or your usual place of residence. You will go somewhere, and normally you might travel, and you might go through 2 or 3 different transit routes, such as if you're driving from, or if you're coming from the northern hemisphere to the southern hemisphere. That's an example where there's lots of different transit routes. At this present moment in time, we can't fly from the UK all the way to New Zealand on one plane. We can fly from Australia to the UK, I think now, in one plane, but we can't fly any further. Really, really long flights. So traditionally, if someone's travelling from the UK to New Zealand, then might fly from, say, Manchester to Dubai to Auckland, for instance, or they might fly. So there'll be a certain amount of different regions that they may go through. If you're on a cruise, you'll be going on even more. You might go on even less at the same time. So someone again going from the Northern Hemisphere to New Zealand, they arrive in Auckland, but Auckland is not their destination. New Zealand is their destination. So sometimes this gets a little bit more complicated. Okay, so that's what Leiper says is needed for the tourism system to work. That's what you need. You need at least one person, one origin, one transit route, and one destination as well. There's various aspects on here that I want you to think about in your assignment. So in your assignment, it's actually looking back on some of those statistics that you've talked about. Okay. Now, when you find out about how your tourists arrive at your place, so for instance, people have talked about I'm trying to think. So people have talked about maybe Rome or Venice. Okay, so there's an airport in Venice, Marco Polo Airport. Okay, and that will show the people arriving from various parts of the world. But that might actually be not an international airport. I can't remember off the top of my head it is. That might be just a regional airport. So you might have to look actually where do people arrive from when they arrive in Italy? Okay, where do those flights, where do they go to across the world? You've already identified, so there might be a lot of people from America going to Rome, for instance. Okay, what flights fly from America into Rome, or what flights leave Rome to go to America? Have a look at some of those. Reference some of those airline websites as well. How do people get to your destination if they're domestic tourists? What routes do they take? What road systems do they take? For instance, if you're talking about Auckland as your destination, you might say people arrive in Auckland from State Highway 1 from the south. You might say people arrive in Auckland State Highway 1 from the north of the country. So there's different aspects that you can look at there. Okay, and again, that's the type of thing that I want you to look at. A lot of you are doing this really, really well. You're finding sources and you're supporting those sources, and that's what I want you to carry on doing. Okay, a lot of you will realise now you've got up to the 5th draft is actually there's going to be a whole heap, lots and lots of references that you're going to be using. One person that I've seen has already got 4 pages of references in their assessment, which is really, really amazing for first year assessment. And these will get more so as you go on throughout the years. Be careful as well. There's a number of drafts that I've seen that people are just saying what's happening. Go a little bit deeper as well. explain what actually the statistics are showing you, what actually things really mean, what's it illustrating, what is the picture, explain the why of all this. Okay, start doing that and you'll be absolutely fine. I am going to publish all the stuff on Leiper and all the stuff on tourism systems, because I know there are a few of you that are, and like I said, this is due on the 3rd of July, draft 5. So this is probably about 10 days before this assessment is due, and I'm recording this. But it's really important for people, because some people are forging their own path ahead, which is really awesome. Some people are quite at that stage, but that's why I've done this video. I've done this video to let people have an awareness of what the module is about, and this video will stay on for as long as you are doing Tourism 1 right up to the end of this semester. Okay, this is the so up to this point you've looked at all the tourism area life cycle, you've looked at Plog's model of centricism, and you've looked at Leiper's whole tourism system model. Okay, so there's 3 theoretical models that you've actually encompassed into this assessment, which has been really quite challenging for you guys. There's a final piece of the assessment to go as well, which is talking about tourism sustainability. And again, I'll do a small video on that to give people a little bit of an indication. So I want you to have a watch of this video. This will give you an understanding of Leiper's whole tourism system model. We will cover this anyway, but this is just a little bit of supporting assistance for you. Okay. Thanks, guys. Speak to you soon.